As I listened to the last panel, and I thought about how many years we've heard about the challenges of our broadband maps, and hearing after hearing on the Hill complaining about the lack of accurate maps, it really was refreshing to see the type of work together with NTIA, the FCC, the states, and really a comprehensive, all of government and all of our states working together to get an accurate assessment of where broadband is and is not. And as we start this panel, I think it's very important to, first commend all of those, especially Sally Doty from my home state of Mississippi. I want to give her a shout out. But this is very important to get that right, and in this panel, get the implementation of the BEAD funding right, as well as the deployment and the best practices for cities, localities, and states to follow, so that both private investment, which is at all-time high, and coming out of the pandemic, federal funding is at a historic transformational high. As we have this mission as a nation, a commitment, a bipartisan commitment to connect every American. And so this panel is going to talk about the best way to get there from where we are today. I'm very proud. INCOMPAS has, over the last 3 years, had a campaign called the Broadband campaign. And it really did help shape the legislation that eventually passed, the guidance with NTIA, and now we're working with state broadband offices like Kansas and Mississippi and Jade. But a lot of our member companies have really been leaders on how do we get all of our cities and localities ready for this mass deployment and modernization of all of our broadband networks. And a lot of different technologies, from fiber to wireless to 5G to fixed wireless to low Earth orbit satellites. So this is a critically important effort. I want to thank the Broadband campaign. Mignon Clyburn was the co-chair and spokesperson for the campaign. And just talk about and celebrate some of the difference we believe this campaign made in the policy making and now in the implementation of the legislation and the awarding soon of the $42.5 billion of BEAD funding. So Jade, I'm going to start with you and introduce yourself, tell a little bit of your background, but then talk about the work Kansas is doing to help your cities adopt best practices, the broadband ready city, and what does it take for a city, a town in Kansas to qualify or meet what you're trying to encourage and incentivize?
Yeah, well, thank you, Chip. As Chip mentioned, my name is Jade Piros de Carvalho, and I run the state broadband office for Kansas. I've been in this role for almost 2 years, and prior to that, I was on the private side for a fiber CLEC that did mostly rural communities for about 7 years. Also was on the local government side for about 10 years as a mayor. So coming at this from a couple of different ways, and really appreciate all the work that INCOMPAS has done on really elevating the permitting issues, because what we're seeing in Kansas are time delays and added costs on the broadband deployment side for permitting that we really feel could be avoided with just a little bit of education in communities. You know, oftentimes when a developer comes into a community wanting to build a $10 million facility, processes fall away, they're streamlined, permits are waivered, incentives are given. But when a provider comes into a community with a similar $10 million investment in broadband, hurdles are erected. And it's because that investment isn't seen in the same fashion, right? And Kansas is a home rule state with a patchwork of processes and fee structures. So this effort called the Broadband Ready Communities is really just a simple ordinance with a checklist of 5 things communities can do to help ready their community for these investments. That includes having a single point of contact for all issues related to a broadband project, a commitment to reviewing permits in 30 days, a commitment to having a reasonable fee structure that is outlined in city ordinance, and really just practicing in non-discriminatory practices. We've heard from our providers that some providers are seeing that they're not treated in the same fashion when they want to come into a community. So really just a commitment to that. We have committed as a broadband office to review applications for the certification within 30 days, and then we'll revisit it every 3 years.
Jade, you've been, I know Kansas is Tornado Alley, but you've been like a burst of fresh air and the leadership that you provided in Kansas, understanding the competitive industry and new entrants in fiber, and just the challenges that they historically have faced, but also all network companies that are deploying networks right now. Earlier today, I don't know if Milo is still here, but he was, Google Fiber was one of the leaders in trying to give a new model of deployment of a new entrant and what cities could do to make it very attractive to invest and partner and build in cities. Ariane has picked up the ball and carried it farther than Milo ever could. I'd like to get yours and Domenick's from Crown Castle, y'all's insight, and how did you develop the checklist? What are good experiences, good models of what the Broadband Ready checklist means to your companies, and good examples that y'all can share?
Well, I will go first. All right. Hey, folks, my name is Ariane Schaffer with Google Fiber. We have been deploying fiber in the ground for over 10 years. Folks 10 years ago thought deploying a gig to the home was crazy. Now we are deploying 8 gig symmetrical to all of our markets, all of the homes in those markets, and we are not stopping there. Of course, to deploy fiber optics, whether on the ground, in the ground or on poles, requires permits, locates, a lot of processes that you need that cities have. We very much from the Broadband Ready checklist, we're taking the incentives approach as opposed to a punishment approach, right? The carrot, not the stick. And the idea there is our cities are who we're partnering with, right? When we're deploying assets in the ground or on poles, these are long-term commitments. We're not here for a few years, right? So we want to make sure that we're having healthy long-term relationships with communities. So we're there, we show up, we ask questions, we listen. What are the things that you guys are struggling with as cities? What can we be doing to help partner? We're not perfect on the private side as well. So we want to make sure that we're offering good resources, but it also means that there are a set of checklist that you'll see just on your screen here that we've come up with as what are the things communities could be doing right now to really help bring broadband deployment. In terms of highlighting cities, we have had the opportunity to work with many incredible cities who are doing excellent work when it comes to permitting. One thing I have here, the city of Raleigh, North Carolina, is one that we've been really happy with deploying. They have, and again, these are things that you might think are happening all over the country, but are actually not. So the city of Raleigh, for example, their permitting is fully online. What? Not all permits are online? Yes, sometimes we have to fax them in depending on the city. So that is a really excellent one. They auto-generate unique numbers for every permit so that every builder can upload their plans to those permit numbers. It also auto-generates emails to the appropriate distribution list for everyone who is on that permit to get relevant updates. I'm going to stop there.
No, that was great. Good morning. My name is Domenick Carroll. I work for Crown Castle. So I'm an external affairs manager for Crown Castle. And in that role, I cover Michigan, Ohio, Western PA, and West Virginia. What that means is I am really getting down into a local level and meeting with jurisdictions that are a lot more rural. They're smaller. So for me, the best part of that is the education piece, right? I get to come into a jurisdiction and have a conversation with folks that have no idea what we're doing or what we're talking about, and bring them along the process. So, as far as using the checklist, There are many things, you know, we talk about innovation and we talk about how we can streamline the process to get these networks built. And, you know, it's as simple as having an updated permitting system, right? It's as simple as being able to bring that permitting system online so folks can see it and have a transparent review of how their application is being handled. But to go into the local level and be able to educate local elected officials and local leaders around how to do that is certainly a challenge. You know, a lot of local municipalities that I go into, they're like, hey, this is the way we've done it here. This is the way we're going to continue to do it here. I don't know what you're coming here to tell me or sell me, but I don't want to hear it, right? And for me, I take that as a challenge, right? Because I want to educate and I want to get that community up to speed on what's available to them as far as funding, but also B, the benefit of us coming in here and building that network. And I think Jade touched on that a little bit. It's not something that you see, right? It's not something, I hear a lot of elected officials say, well, I mean, well, what's in it for me to change the way we do things, right? And that's where the education piece comes in. And that's where I get really excited when I start to have that conversation. Because I say, what's in it for you is bringing your community into the 21st century, right? Bringing your community and being able to have those opportunities for your constituents, being able to have those opportunities for your schools, your hospital systems, and even maybe, you know, your municipal network that might need upgraded, right? So I'll stop there, but I could go on for the whole half hour. I won't, but that is really for me, you know, that pro-innovation piece, I think is key in helping those jurisdictions understand what that means and what that means for them.
You know, as we talk about the checklist, three years ago, Alan Davison, right after his confirmation to be head of NTIA, came to a board dinner that we had after our policy summit. And as we were debating and looking at the infrastructure funding and what it was going to mean, he heard from member after member after member of our companies that really didn't talk as much about the money, although the money is critical. They talked about the barriers to deployment. And he established an office of permitting reform and best practices as a result of those conversations. And in just a little bit, he's going to be coming to give us a keynote conversation. But part of what we're trying to do is to create a common language among policymakers, regulators, industry, states, and mayors. And the checklist, I want to commend our member companies and this campaign that created a common language of best practices. As we have seen it now, whether it's Kansas or Mississippi or other states, use the checklist as a reference for what is a broadband-ready city. Part of the guidance and also the conversations with NTIA is the importance of wholesale competition and open access. That if you're going to build to an unserved area in, say, rural Mississippi, and you're going to connect the post office there, or the Walmart, or the pharmacy, and maybe it's the only, and it should be because it's unserved, the only broadband line that meets the new definitions in that small community. Why is wholesale access so important, and what are y'all seeing on the ground and working with your companies and communities?
Great. Thank you, Chip. For those of you who don't know, my name is Mike Galvin. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer at Granite Telecommunications. Granite serves multi-site businesses and governmental agencies, taking a lot of the network infrastructure that we've been discussing and wrapping it up and making it available for end users, for the schools and libraries in those communities, for the small businesses, for the mid-sized businesses, frankly, for some of even the largest businesses that have very commonly broadly dispersed retail stores, locations, other network facilities, pipelines, for some of our federal customers, bases in certain locations. Frankly, recruitment centers for the Army or Air Force, all of whom need the additional bandwidth that are often in unserved or underserved areas. The broadband industry has changed over the past 10 years. Involved in that chain it is NTIA, and I'm glad Alan's going to be here to talk about their great work and some of the policies that they implemented with INCOMPAS's help and guidance, which I thought was key. But even before then, leading to those changes, there were other federal agencies that had the foresight to think about the policies that should be in place when building out new infrastructure with federal taxpayer expenses, money to build new network connections or first-time network connections in unserved or unserved areas. The Department of Agriculture, as the broadband and Internet of Things has spread to agriculture, you can easily understand why it is there's so many communities and so many businesses there that are not served, implemented an open access policy to try to have an option so that end users get better experience and there's more of a competitive presence, even when there's only one physical network. The Department of Treasury, and I know we're going to hear from Joey Wender, who's led the Capital Projects Initiative, also had the foresight to implement as part of their policies an open access preference, which also got picked up by NTIA. And so that NTIA recommended for grantees who would be applying for funds to make their networks in those underserved or unserved areas available. A number of states have come forward with plans that do exactly that, as recommended by NTIA, as implemented by Agriculture and Treasury as part of the recent changes in the broadband infrastructure, so that states, including Massachusetts, Illinois, Colorado, Washington, Florida, Pennsylvania, have all implemented preference systems so that in evaluating grantees' bids to provide services to unserved and underserved areas, that gets taken up. I know at Granite, and I know for other resellers, we have customers that have hundreds or thousands of locations who have both cutting-edge AI initiatives. Sana was here earlier, for those who missed it, to talk about some of the things that we're helping those business customers do. They have the most advanced AI systems. They have fiber at head-end units and at data centers, but they have 100-year-old circuits at other locations and need that implemented and aggregated and resolved to make it functional for the business. And that's the role that we serve and others like us serve within the industry. We really think it's critically important to have open access at a state and federal level.
Jade, is one of the items on the checklist is innovative ways like micro trenching to speed deployment, minimize disruption or damage to the roads and the rights of way, or quick restoration. What are some of the things that you see that would encourage and incent the most innovative deployment technologies and methods? And talk to us a little bit about that. Domenick mentioned it. I'd love to hear from both Ariane and Domenick, anything that they would like to add to your view.
Well, I would just mention, Chip, that I think there's a lot of hesitation in employing innovative methods, especially when you're utilizing public funds. The public sector isn't always keen on trying new things because the risk tolerance is so much, lower with public funds. But I implore policymakers to consider that if you do things the same way you've always done them, you're going to get what you've always got, which is a lack of broadband parity in underserved areas and economically distressed areas. And so we're really encouraging policymakers, especially those local policymakers that you pointed out, Domenick, that say we've always done it this way, to really consider at least piloting some of these more innovative options seeing how it goes, recognizing that the world continues to spin, and then maybe using that as a jumping off point for continuing new methods, because we know we're not going to get there if we do things the way we've always done. BEAD deployments, by definition, are going to occur in areas that have been economically infeasible without public investment, right? And so without taking every single angle at, decreasing those costs, decreasing those time delays, we're just not going to get to that internet for all.
Yeah.
Domenick?
I would just add on, when you talk about innovation, right? And you talk about innovative construction practices. And Chip, you hit on it a little bit here when you talk about conditions of roads, right? That's a lot of the feedback that I get when I meet with local jurisdictions, with their public works folks. Their main concern is, I want the integrity of that road to not be affected by whatever it is you're doing, right? And we know traditional construction methods, we are going to affect the integrity of that road. And they're more timely and they're more costly, right? So the one thing that I try to do when I'm having these conversations is really just emphasize the fact that we are here we don't want to affect the integrity of your road, right? We want to use these innovative construction practices so that the integrity stays intact. And once we start getting past that hurdle, they become a little more open, at least to the conversation. But you're right, it's very hard to get them past this is the way we've always done it conversation.
Well, and I think carefully crafted provisions and contracts that protect those interests, outline that you acknowledge safety concerns, road integrity concerns, can help to allay a lot of those issues.
Absolutely.
With the record levels of private investment, historic levels of federal investment, some people worry about supply chain. Some people worry about workforce. Any thoughts on how to best create, and I'll be having a great conversation with the CEO of TIA later on efforts on workforce training, but talk a little bit about supply chain, any other challenges that we may face as y'all look at pursuing BEAD, partnering with other firms, companies that are going to be going after BEAD. How do we address those issues, the practical issues of workforce and supply?
I know that we look to partner with entities that have innovative products. I think you've mentioned a lot of the new wireless products, a lot of the low orbit satellite solutions. We and others have come up with other forms of TDM replacement services that we fully intend to roll out as part of a next-gen innovative solution.
I would just say from a state perspective, states do have the option to use a portion of their BEAD allocation for workforce development. You'll find if your state is doing that in their Volume 2 requirement 10, and Kansas is proposing 1.5% of our BEAD allocation go to workforce development opportunities in alignment with TIA and some other partners at the state agencies. Hoping to get those dollars up front so that we can put those programs into use and get those certifications done before the actual shovels go into the ground and those people are needed.
As we close this panel, we're gonna premiere our second premiere, a video that Mignon Clyburn did on behalf of the Broadband campaign. I want to recognize Jeff Sharp, who's helped lead and run the campaign. Broadband created great content all the way through at different stages of the legislative, of the Commerce Department guidance, and then to the states and localities and to the mayors. And this video, I think, captures the essence of what we're trying to achieve, and it's extremely compelling, I think. And so we'll close here. We wanted our friend Alan Davidson to see this video. And then we look forward to his keynote.
is our land, a land for you and me. And in our land, we all need the internet. Broadband is how we study, share, deliver, create, binge, and work. But 30 million Americans don't have access to the internet. And millions more in small towns and in growing cities are stuck with broadband that is old, slow, and costs way too much. With broadband infrastructure, we have a historic opportunity, a chance to go big and bold, a chance to right the wrongs of the past and build a better future. Broadband is infrastructure for working people. Done right, we can meet our growing bandwidth demands. We can help mayors and local leaders attract investment and give every neighborhood access to the jobs of tomorrow. Wired, wireless, satellite, and 5G networks, we need them all, and they all need fiber. If we're going to do the work, dig a trench, build a tower, or hang a small cell, then it just makes sense to connect to the fastest, future-forward networks available. Look, we are the nation that invented the internet, the land that made competition the law. But other countries see our sluggishly slow internet speeds as a weakness. They are deploying fiber, 5G, and setting gigabit speed goals. We can build a land with no homework at, a land that closes the digital divide, a land that unleashes competition to bring innovation and faster speeds to every kid in every corner of America. Because this is our land. And the internet was made for you and me.
I want to thank this panel. More importantly, I want to thank Jade, all the broadband offices, our companies who have sponsored the broadband campaign and have worked with us and our staff, the INCOMPAS team, to really achieve some tremendous legislative, working closely with NTIA and the states, important mission objectives. So thank you all.